want to thank everyone for coming tonight to hear this. Tonight, we take a moment to look at one of the great jazz artists in history, with a focus on his childhood and the Jewish family that helped make him who he was. It's a story of communities encountering each other and finding common ground between them. But this is at its heart a story of people facing adversity, meeting challenges thrown at them, and through acts of tzedakah, making the world a much better place. Louis Armstrong is inarguably one of the best jazz artists of the 20th century. One of the earliest superstars in the field, he would become the face of jazz as it moved into the mainstream, dazzling audiences with his chord improvisations and promoting the Dixieland style of jazz from New Orleans to the public. He helped to take jazz out of speakeasies and into living rooms, serving as a jazz ambassador for the US during the Cold War, to show a different side of our country to places that were at the time under Russian influence. During his lifetime, Armstrong wore a Star of David, as seen in this picture of him from 1954. At times, his manager, Joe Glazer, the son of a Russian Jewish doctor from Chicago, would claim that he was the one who gave the pendant to Armstrong, a claim Satchmo would dispute. Despite these conflicting recollections, the two men would have a solid 34-year friendship and partnership, as Glaser opened doors for Armstrong that allowed him to become an icon. In 1969, Armstrong was under the care of Dr. Gary Zucker at New York's Beth Israel Hospital to treat heart and kidney ailments he was suffering from 2 years before his death. During that time, the full story behind why he wore the Star of David came out in an amazing testament. Confined to his hospital bed for most of 1969, Armstrong wrote out by hand a 77-page document revealing in detail parts of his life that only passing reference was made to over the years. While he discussed in interviews and other authorized biographies some aspects of his and his interactions with the Karnoffsky family, it was his handwritten history that went into details about these years and how this Jewish family were so influential in his upbringing. The family that helped shape Louis Armstrong came from the town of Vilky in what is today Lithuania. From 1795 to 1918, however, the country during that time was part of the Russian Empire. It was also where a Jewish community established themselves soon after the Third Partition erased Poland, and along with it Lithuania, from the map. The first synagogue in Vilky was founded in 1851, and by the end of the 19th century, it was estimated that Jews made up 71% of the population. This would be the high point for the community in the town, as after Lithuania gained independence in 1918, many of the Jews of Vilky would leave thanks to economic hardship suffered during the Great Depression. Those members of the community who remained were subsequently eliminated by a Nazi massacre during the Second World War, leaving no survivors. This is not to say that Vilky was a welcoming place under the Tsars. There were a number of pogroms that took place throughout the Russian Empire, such as the one in 1983, which this image depicts. There were also localized outbreaks of intolerance, such as the one in the spring of 1900 that encouraged the Karnoffsky family to leave Vilky to head to the United States. In 1900, the Karnoffskys, posing here for a family picture taken around that time, were a large family who, like many immigrants, would leave the old world for a new opportunity, taking whatever jobs they could as they looked for a place in the new world. Of the members of the family pictured here, the ones that figured most prominently in Louis Armstrong's recollections and loomed largest in his life was the family patriarch, Louis, formerly Liba in the old country, who was next to the matriarch, sitting in the center, Tilly, formerly Esther, and the two sons, Alex and Morris, who in this shot stand at the end of the assemblage like pillars to an archway. This, we will see, is actually a fairly apt analogy of the role in Louis' life. When the family came to the US, they ended up in New Orleans. At the time, the city was quite prosperous, a major port at the mouth of the Mississippi River on the Gulf of Mexico, with a population of 287,000, making it the 12th largest city in the country. And as the city had just completed a network of electrified streetcar lines by the time the Karnoffskys arrived. New Orleans would have made any new arrivals believe that this was a modern progressive city. The reality of New Orleans, the Karnoffskys would soon discover, was far more complex, with aspects that no amount of modernity could address. When they moved in, the family found themselves in the Third Ward, also known as Backtown, the less prosperous part of the city. The family found their place in Backtown close to the Storyville district, near the Southern Railroad terminal. The Storyville neighborhood was a red light district regulated by the New Orleans City Council, where the trade was tolerated from 1897 until 1917, when it was closed down to keep U.S. forces getting ready for World War I, mustering nearby from being felled by venereal diseases. While the neighborhood had a reputation being so dangerous that it was also called the battlefield, it also offered opportunities for the newly arrived family, where the father Louis became a tailor. As the family put down roots in New Orleans, Louis Karnoffsky opened his tailor shop on South Rampart Street. The family lived above the store, seen here shortly before Hurricane Ida demolished the building in October of 2021, making it the center of their lives and the life of a young man who had become a part of their family, oftentimes called Cousin Louis. By 1907, Louis Armstrong had experienced more pain than most 7-year-olds had, either then or today. His father abandoned the family soon after he was born, leaving him alone with his mother, Mary Ann, a 16-year-old girl who, to survive at times, took to street walking. For the first 5 years of his life, he was raised by his grandmother, Josephine, before he and his younger sister, Beatrice, moved back in with Mary Ann, continuing to live in Backtown, right in the midst of the battlefield. In 1907, Louis left the 5th grade in order to be able to find work for his family. At this point in his life, he came to the attention of the Karnoffsky boys. Louis first found work with Alex, who would collect rags and other junk in the mornings. Alex's business required that he be up early as a junk collector, and during the time he worked with him, Louis was up and ready to roll out with Alex at 5 in the morning every day. Armstrong would accompany the cart as Alex would look for and reclaim scrap, a profession that was often considered to be at the very bottom of the ladder. Armstrong would recall in his 1969 recollections that the Karnoffskys would teach him, quote, how to live with real life and determination. Louis would further note in the document how the Karnoffskys faced prejudice comparable to what he himself has faced. He wrote, I was only 7 years old, but I could easily see the ungodly treatment that the white folks were handing the poor Jewish family whom I worked for. Later, Louis would take on an additional job, this time with Morris Karnoffsky, who at twilight sold hard coal, also known as anthracite, from the back of his wagon to customers who were looking to heat their stoves for the night. Many of the clients Morris and Louis would sell to were in Storyville, often independent prostitutes and occasionally madams looking to keep their establishments warm. As part of his job description, Louis would have a tin horn that he would blow at as Morris's wagon came down the street. This is believed to be the first such instance where Louis Armstrong performed an instrument in public and could technically be considered the start of his professional career as a musician. At the end of days selling hard coal, Louis would be offered a meal at the Karnoffsky house by Tilly when the work was finished. As Louis was a hard worker with no father in the household, she was more than willing to offer him supper, especially as there might not be an opportunity for the young man to get a hot meal otherwise. Louis came to appreciate the Jewish dishes he ate at the Karnoffsky's table and would keep matzah as his home to snack on for the rest of his life. While he shared those meals, he also became fluent in Yiddish. At times, especially if it had been a late night working with Morris, with only a few hours to go before he would go out with Alex on his rounds at 5 a.m., Louis would be allowed to sleep over at the house. When put to bed, Tilly would often offer lullaby to help him get to sleep. By means of example, the following is a segment from a contemporary recording of the Yiddish lullaby Yankele, offered here to provide some sense of what Tilly would most likely have sung to Louis.
Lulu, schluf mir schon jonkele mein Scheiner, die eigentlich die schwarze Gimmerzi, a ingele, wo's hat schon alle Zindele, muss noch die Mama singen, a Lulu, a ingele, wo's hat schon alle Zindele, muss noch die Mama singen, a Lulu.
There are elements of these lullabies. Armstrong went on to record his version of the Irving Berlin-penned Russian Lullaby, which he released in 1950 with his All-Stars combo for Decca Records, and can note how the music he heard when sleeping over the Karnoffskys is reflected in his rendition. One time, while working with Morris, Louis saw a cornet in the window of a pawn shop. As you can see in this illustration, the cornet is an instrument similar to the trumpet, which Armstrong would be better associated with later in his career. The main difference between the two instruments, which are not related even though they look similar, is the cornet produces a softer tone compared to those made by the trumpet, which developed in an integral component of jazz music. When he saw that Louis was fascinated by the cornet, Morris fronted him $2 of the $5 the pawnbroker was asking for, which is equivalent in value to about $150 in today's money, and told Louis he could pay off the rest in installments at 50 cents at a time. Armstrong's life took a dramatic turn on New Year's Eve in 1912, when he was arrested for firing blanks from a pistol into the air to celebrate New Year's. For that, Louis was sentenced to the colored waif's home, where he would spend the rest of his boyhood. While he no longer worked for either of the Karnoffsky brothers, he did keep in touch with the family for years afterwards, and was one of Morris's best customers when he established Morris Music in the 1920s, a record and phonograph retailer that was the first music store in New Orleans to offer jazz records for sale. During his time at the colored waif's home, Armstrong received formal musical training from Peter Davis, a music instructor and band leader. Armstrong would credit Davis with his musical training and honor him at every opportunity that presented himself. Whether his continual promotion of Davis's instruction while not highlighting the roles of others from his youth as much, prompted Armstrong to write his memoir in 1969, is a subject for debate. Following the end of his stint at the Colored Waifs Home, Louis again lived with his mother Marianne and sister Beatrice. After a few fits and starts in picking a career, including trying to sell hard coal in Storyville to the same customers Morris had sold to, Louis Armstrong decided to go all in as a musician to support himself, and from there on, to much better things. While Armstrong did not share in depth much of what he learned from his time with the Karnoffsky family until 1969, we can see the effects of his experience in how he lived the rest of his life. He was remembered as an adult for his warmth and gregariousness, which in all likelihood showed the influence of Louis's time with the family from Lithuania. Those years look to have helped make him become the generous, hardworking human being that he was noted for. Having been accepted by and nurtured during those formative years, one can see how he honored his Jewish family who embraced him by carrying forward the love and acceptance he was shown as a child. As for where the story began, on May 22nd of 2021, the town of Vilky dedicated a park and outdoor stage to both Louis Armstrong and the Karnoffsky family. A plaque honoring Armstrong was unveiled close to the stage, which supposedly was erected on the spot where the Karnoffsky family's house had been before they left for the United States. In closing, we share Armstrong's version of Go Down Moses, which the city congregation uses in our Haggadah service. Whether this version might ultimately influence your use of the song at Passover, well, I leave that decision up to you.
Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt land. Let my people go.
Now when Israel was in Egypt land,
Let my people go.
oppressed so hard they could not stand.
Let my people go.
So the Lord said, go down,
Go down,
Moses,
Moses,
way down in Egypt land. Tell old Pharaohs to let my people go.
let my people go.
So Moses went to Egypt land.
Let my people go.
He made old Pharaoh understand.
Let my people go.
Yes, the Lord said, go down, Moses,
Moses,
way down in Egypt land. Tell them Pharaohs to let my people go.
let my people go.
Thus spoke the Lord, bold Moses said,
Let my people go.
if not, I'll smite your firstborn dead.
Let my people go.
'Cause the Lord said, go down, Moses,
Moses,
way down in Egypt land. Tell old Pharaoh
to let my people go.
you again for having me speak.